everyone should get a lipoprotein little a level checked at least once in their lifetime. Hi friends, this is a map of people with high cholesterol in the United States. So where do you live on this map? I live mostly in this area right here. It's mostly in white, but millions of people live in the green area. The greener the shade, the higher their cholesterol level. But most people don't have bad cholesterol from bad genes, although there are a small set of people who do. And that's why it's important for you to see your own medical doctor and take a special blood test that I'll go over later. But why is it so much greener in the southeast? And then let me show you another map. Here's a map of the states with the highest mortality levels. It's really bad in the blue areas. Why is it that their life expectancy is lower? They literally have the lowest life expectancy in the entire United States. And people pass for many reasons, but we do know that heart disease is still the #1 reason, followed by cancer. So whatever they're doing in their lifestyle is not serving them well. And today we have multiple billion-dollar blockbuster medications just to address cholesterol. But we know 50% of people who take cholesterol medications, they don't find any benefit. Maybe it's because they quit, because they can't tolerate the side effects, or maybe the drugs themselves can't overcome the hurdle of the food that the body is absorbing. And that's why it's important to talk about the best foods to fix cholesterol. But when it comes to cholesterol, there's so much confusion and controversy on whether or not we even need to lower it.
We have bought into the idea that LDL cholesterol is bad cholesterol.
I believe that if you are metabolically healthy, you don't care if your cholesterol goes up a little bit if you eat red meat.
And so we're going to go through the best foods that fix cholesterol and also address whether or not you should do it. Now, have you ever wondered what doctors did before medications? I mean, what did people do before we invented these billion-dollar blockbuster drugs? So what I found out doing research for this video actually even surprised me. My name is Dr. Liu, and I'm a double board certified physician practicing for nearly 30 years. But of course, this video is for informational purposes only, since I'm not your physician and nothing really replaces your own physician. That connection is super, super duper important, that you have a local provider, even if you finish all my videos. Now, to be clear, I'm not a cardiologist, nor am I a lipidologist. My field of medicine deals with the entire body, not just specific parts. But cholesterol actually matters for your entire body. So then why is it so bad that we have more of it? That's the key to whether or not you need to lower it. So let's start fixing cholesterol at breakfast, because there's no controversy of how to lower it. And the first food category I would add is one of the oldest, least glamorous, but most powerful foods for lowering cholesterol. And that's oats and barley. Yeah, actually eat them together. And let's upgrade from that instant oatmeal packet, with the sugar. And let's go you even can go for plain rolled oats or steel cut oats or oat groats or oat bran. The key is to have this dish work for you and to eat it savory, not drowned in sugar. Now, I would cook the barley first because it's a little bit harder to cook than the oats. Let's say rinse half a cup of barley, put in a pot with 2.5 to 3 cups of water. And then you simmer it for about 25 to 35 minutes until it starts getting chewy and tender. And about 10 minutes before it's done, I would add in the oats and cook that for about 5 to 10 minutes, stirring it often until the whole thing is creamy. If you're going for a savory version, which I would recommend, cook the oats and barley in some broth. That'll help flavor it. Add some mushrooms, some garlic, some spinach. You can even add a little bit of miso at the end. For steel-cut oats and oat groats, you need to cook them earlier. So put them in the barley maybe a little bit earlier, more like 15 to 20 minutes. And then you simmer it all together for a total of 25 minutes. Now, the reason why I picked these two grains is because these foods contain a special kind of soluble fiber called beta-glucan, which forms a gel-like substance in the gut. That gel matters because one of the ways your body gets rid of cholesterol is through your bile. So your liver uses cholesterol to make bile acids so that you can absorb fats. Those bile acids, they are necessary for you to literally eat and digest the fats. Then your body can decide whether to recycle them, that means absorb them back, or send them through the anus or the stool in the toilet to be flushed down. So soluble fiber, it traps the bile acids in the gut so that more of them actually leave your body instead of being recycled. Then the liver has no option but to take more of the cholesterol out of your bloodstream to make new bile acids. That's one of the reasons oats and barley can help improve cholesterol patterns in your blood work. And this is eating strategically to use food as medicine. And the beautiful thing is that oats and barley, they don't just help you control cholesterol, they also help keep you regular so that you don't get constipated, and they feed your gut microbiome. They slow down digestion to improve satiety so you're not hungry all the time. They blunt your sugar spikes when you eat them in whole food form, and they allow your meals to be simple, cheap, convenient, and sustainable. But here's a mistake people make. They turn oats into dessert by basically adding brown sugar, maple syrup, sweeteners, sweetened dry fruit, chocolate chips, sweetened plant milk. No wonder why they're hungry about a couple hours later and they're always craving for sugar. So you're eating sugar and more sugar and more sugar. And then some people add butter to it, right? So that you're eating sugar and carbs throughout the day. That is why learning how to eat savory foods as a first meal of the day is an important habit to add. But we're not done with the soluble fiber solution. That's really important that you eat soluble fiber savory foods. So to those savory oats and barley, add some ground flax seeds, chia seeds, and blueberries. Literally all these foods have soluble fiber. And you will notice that when you add flax and chia, it gets wet and sticky, right? If you put some water in it, it gets sticky. That stickiness is a soluble fiber that will trap in the bile. So you may have to put a little bit more water in your concoction, the oat and barley concoction, when you add flax and chia. And when you break up the blueberries, it also sucks in water and becomes a gel as well. Blueberries have soluble fiber too. It works so well that did you know that the first cholesterol medication that really became important, took off before statins, was cholestyramine. It was a bile acid sequestrant sold as Crestran. It was FDA approved in 1973 and works by binding bile acids in the gut so that the liver pulls more cholesterol from the blood. And that lowers your blood cholesterol. Doesn't that sound like what soluble fiber naturally does? Cholestyramine is actually still used today, but for other reasons, as it's not as effective as other cholesterol-lowering drugs, such as statins. Cholesterol regulation affects the entire body, and influencers, they won't stop talking about it. Now, there's no debate that soluble fiber lowers cholesterol. The debate is on whether or not cholesterol directly causes heart disease, and whether or not the effects of grains on your blood sugar and your liver is worth the effects of grains to lowering your cholesterol. Now, if you watch my videos, you know that no two grains are alike and that I'm all about food quality. But the problem is our food quality has been decimated with ultra-processed, sugary, starchy foods paired with super-duper doses of fats. And that's not the type of oats and barley that I'm advocating for people to eat. In fact, the same simple, unrefined, economical oats and barley that was around since the Roman gladiators is what I'm advocating for people to eat. And by the way, if you find values in my videos, would you mind checking if you're subscribed? And if you are not subscribed, please hit the subscribe button, like button, and share button, because it does change how many people get to watch my videos. I appreciate your partnership in helping to change the world. I actually want to show you a book. This book is like 70 years old. Doesn't it look like it? And it's called Eat Well, Stay Well. This book was written in 1959. Kind of looks like it, huh? By the most influential nutrition influencer in America, actually in the world, way before social media. Now, his contribution to nutrition medicine, to physiology, to cardiology, to medicine is immense. But during his lifetime, he literally supported the US military. I think he invented K rations to make sure our troops were well fed during World War II. His body of work actually sent into motion to find what is really shortening the lives for millions and billions of people around the globe with heart disease. His work actually sparked all these drugs, billion-dollar drugs, right? And in fact, we still reference him today through nutrition to heart disease, as well as cholesterol. And his name is Ansel Keys. Unfortunately, like every influencer, there is going to be people who disagree with their beliefs, right? And you may or may not have heard of him. I bet, though, you've heard of the Mediterranean diet, which he made popular. He was a professor. He literally had 3 PhDs. And again, he invented K rations that fed soldiers during the war. And he was a lead researcher in a famous study called the 7-Country Study, which looked at the root cause of cardiovascular disease. Now, his biggest idea was that specific dietary fats could raise blood cholesterol levels and increase the risk of heart disease. Kind of simple, right? Like a lot of medicine is based on that now. And this became known as the diet heart hypothesis, which has still been proven to be fairly accurate. Basically, the quality of fats that you eat will determine the health of your heart. But people have more fat a bit and plugged in other ideas of their own. So let's look at why is this so? And if you can understand your heart, you can really learn to upgrade your food quality. So let's start with the basics. First, cholesterol makes every single cell in your body. So this is a normal heart tissue. It's not cholesterol free. Cholesterol is part of the human biology. The heart cells, all their membranes, they use cholesterol as a structural ingredient to hold just a cell together. And it helps the membrane stay stable, but yet flexible. It controls how easily substances can pass through in and out of the cell or the cell membrane. And cholesterol helps organize membrane signaling zones where receptors, ion channels, and transport proteins, they sit. In other words, cholesterol is not automatically a villain. Your cardiac muscle cells, your valve cells, your endothelial cells, your nerve-like conduction cells, and blood vessels, cells, they all need cholesterol in the right location, in the right amount, and in the right form. So the problem is not that cholesterol is existing in the tissue. The problem is when cholesterol-rich particles circulate in excess. That then becomes retained sometimes in the valve, sometimes in the vessel walls, or they become oxidized or inflammatory and begin changing the architecture of the heart. So cholesterol is normal in heart tissue. Let's just get that straight. But excess cholesterol-rich particles in the wrong place can remodel the heart tissue. And when it comes to the conduction system, that means ischemia or the lack of blood flow can cause fibrosis and rhythm problems. So in the valves, that means that lipid-driven inflammation causes calcification, especially in high pressure area. But basically all valves are high pressure, but more so in the aortic valve where you're getting a direct bolus of blood from your heart. Cholesterol worsens calcified aortic disease. A normal valve is flexible, but when lipoproteins get oxidized, phospholipids and inflammatory cells, they accumulate inside the valve tissue. And then the valve interstitial cells can begin behaving, basically more like bone-forming cells. And over time, the valve becomes thickened, stiff, and calcified. And this is why severe aortic stenosis, that's not just wear and tear. It can actually look like biologically really similar to atherosclerosis in some ways. The lipid retention, the oxidation, the inflammation, and calcification, they all contribute to the destruction of tissue. And this is where lipoprotein little a cholesterol-carrying particle with oxidized phospholipid activity, is especially linked to faster aortic valve calcification. And that is why everyone should get a lipoprotein little a level checked at least once in their lifetime. to see if they're at risk, because that is not a marker that nutrition and diet can change too much. Now, in the cardiac muscle, if you have this problem, that means you can impair blood flow, it can cause scar formation, it can make contractions weaker, and it can lose the structural integrity of your heart. So then that leads to what raises cholesterol levels. It's actually a specific kind of hard fat that stacks together nicely. It's called saturated fat. That tends to raise blood cholesterol, especially the cholesterol carried in atherogenic particles that will drive this inflammation. And that specific particle actually changes how the liver handles cholesterol. So your liver is the key regulator in all of this. And just like before, one major way to reduce cholesterol is for the liver to pull it out of the blood. That means that there's less in circulation, there's less chance of these particles entering the arterial valves or arterial walls. And this is why major heart organizations still recommend reducing saturated fat and replacing it with unsaturated fats rather than refined carbohydrates, which happened in the 1990s. The American Heart Association states that eating too much saturated fat, it can raise your LDL cholesterol levels, and its scientific advisory concluded that replacing that saturated fat with polyunsaturated fats or monounsaturated fats actually can decrease your LDL cholesterol. And this is true. And you can try it yourself. And the person who ignited the research in cholesterol and heart disease was the same guy who wrote this book, Ansel. He said that saturated fat can push the system higher towards higher cholesterol burdens. And to reduce it, you got to increase your liver's ability to clear cholesterol out of the bloodstream. Now, monounsaturated fats, remember, it's a replacement of the saturated fats. It's always best to get most of it in whole food form so that your system moves in the right direction. And monounsaturated fats, by the way, are fats that people associate with olive oil, avocado oil, or avocados, almonds, hazelnut, peanuts, just about every nut and seed, except for coconut. So when monounsaturated fat replaces saturated fat, they generally lower more harmful cholesterol-carrying particles. And they also tend to fit into the dietary patterns that improve vascular and heart biology, basically eating more plants, more polyphenols, more fiber, and less processed meats, less butter fat, less refined foods. Basically, I'm describing the Mediterranean diet or the Asian diet. Health Canada's review also found cholesterol-lowering benefit when the saturated fat was replaced by mono and polyunsaturated fats. And systemic reviews concluded that replacing saturated fats with polyunsaturated fats or monounsaturated fats or high-quality carbohydrates, they both can lower coronary heart disease events.
Hi, friends. I am so thrilled that you want to take charge of your health and take charge of your food. Now, I know nutrition can be complex, but it doesn't have to be. And I'm here to support you in this lifelong journey. So if you point your camera app to this QR code, it'll take you to a link for a free handout that I created just for you. And if you like it, if you want to see other handouts, please go to the link in my show notes, and then you can leave me your feedback on what I could do to help you in your journey. Okay, back to the video now.
Now, the replacement matters. If someone removes saturated fat, but then replaces it with, let's say, white flour, sugar, your pastries and your cookies, ultra-processed starch, you name it, and probably every country has it, cholesterol numbers may not improve meaningfully. And then you develop insulin resistance, high triglycerides, fatty liver, your inflammation will likely worsen. So the better swap is not eating less fat, more junk food. The better swap is less saturated fat, butter, cream, cheese, fatty processed meats, coconut oil, palm oil, and high saturated fat packaged foods. And instead, eat more whole food fats from olives, avocado, nuts, and seeds, and minimally processed plant foods. But that's not the real reason for why I was looking for this book. I'm actually showing you this book and talking about Ansel, not because he glorified saturated fat or that he has 3 PhDs or he influenced government. Too many people have academic degrees that really don't influence the right thing, and they're highly influential in government making poor policies, right? These things are not difficult to do. What's so special about Dr. Keyes is the fact that he became a centenarian. In other words, he lived till 100 years old. So this man was born in 1904. You're going to meet lots of influencers who have PhDs and whatever degrees that they want to invent. But the one thing they don't have is longevity. How many young influencers are telling you what to buy at Costco, or telling you which fats are good to eat and avoid, or writing all the glorified biochemical reactions, and you know deep down inside that these influencers, they're not licensed to prescribe any medications or have ever worked in the hospital or morgue to see exactly what their diet or the lack of diet they're recommending does to the human body. And by the way, there are many advocates of fasting, just an aside. But Dr. Keyes, he was a grandfather of fasting, as he was the original physiologist who literally conducted semi-starvation experiments on normal, healthy men during World War II. Basically, those men, they didn't want to fight in the war, so they volunteered their body for humanity to figure out what happens to people when we starve them, what happens to people when they're in famine, war, prison camp conditions. 36 young, healthy volunteers, they subjected their bodies for a year to first be semi-starved, and then they got refeeding. And you would be really surprised what he found. So they lost actually 25% of their body weight in about 6 months. This is no joke starvation, no joke fasting. And then they recovered the next 6 months. And the results were so dramatic. Not only did the men become weaker, colder, slower, and more tired, their metabolism dropped, their heart rate slowed. And some actually developed swelling, dizziness, anemia, loss of libido, and reduced physical stamina. Now, is that what you want to do with your body? Yeah, not me. But the physiological effects were just as important as the mental effects. Many people became obsessed with food. They read cookbooks. They talked about meals constantly. They chewed gum excessively. They became irritable, depressed, anxious, socially withdrawn, and in some cases, developed behaviors that looked very similar to having an eating disorder. So the American Psychological Association, they describe the study as showing the intense physical and psychological decline caused by starvation. And one of the biggest lessons was that food restriction can really change your personality. And these were not weak men. They were screened as healthy, motivated, and psychologically fit and stable people. Yet, when they were semi-starved, it made them anxious, rigid, food-focused, emotionally unstable, and sometimes compulsive. And his original experiment is still used in treating eating disorders. It really showed that some behaviors we think of as mental may actually be driven biologically from underfeeding. And the refeeding phase was also revealing. Simply giving a modest number of calories was just simply not enough for full recovery. Keyes, he later emphasized that meaningful rehabilitation often required much more food than expected. And sometimes that was around 4,000 calories per day for months. And that's because the body, it had to rebuild all that lost tissue, restore hormones, repair metabolism, and normalize the brain's relationship with food. But today, have we learned anything from that experiment? I think people forgot about it. That's why we're promoting fasting. That's why a show like The Biggest Loser was allowed to even run. And they literally repeated that experiment a little bit differently, but they semi-starved their people and they overexerted them, they undernourished them, and then they ended up gaining more weight than they did before they started. Have you ever asked yourself why you ate what you did last week? And you will probably answer that you ate the food you liked so far as it was convenient to eat them, right? So that's literally a direct quote from Dr. Keyes in his Eat Well, Stay Well book. People in the 1950s struggle with the same thing. And then you may have added that you ate what you thought was good for you, right? Human diets are always compromises between what appeals to our appetite and what foods that we have available and what we think we should be eating for strength and health, right? That was Dr. Keyes. That's literally directly from his book. I tried to actually look up, barley, oats, flax seeds, chia seeds, and blueberries in Dr. Keyes' book, but unfortunately, he didn't actually mention those specific foods. However, he did make a general statement to say that there is no problem with fat from any ordinary fruit. And it's actually really important to eat more fruit so that you can have more bowel movements to move cholesterol out of your body. But I understand that sometimes that's hard to do because a fruit doesn't taste good, right? Even in the 1950s, he wrote that European visitors would complain that there must be something wrong with the American soil because the fruit that they would taste here, it was so much inferior to the ones that they had at home. And Dr. Key said that the answer is that we are sure that we can grow any fruit as well here as anywhere else ever. But here we find clever ways of prolonging their market life. And that's what's doing the damage, right? That makes fruit taste so bad when it's supposed to taste so good. And that's why you guys should try an Asian supermarket or a farmer's market or grow your own fruit because it makes a huge difference. It's a world of difference in quality and taste and nutrition. And what all these foods have in common is intact whole food soluble fiber. Now, unfortunately, back in the 1950s, fiber was not on Dr. Keyes' radar when he wrote this book, but he did appreciate that fiber helped keep people regular. Well, a little bit later in 1969, Dr. Dennis Burkitt, he was volunteering in Africa and he noticed that people didn't get the heart diseases that we have in America. And they also had less gastrointestinal diseases. And he noticed that their diet was very high in plants. I mean, 100% plants, and they were all high in fiber. So he started writing about what became the fiber hypothesis in an article called Related Disease, Related Cause. And that helped lay the foundation for this idea that many Western diseases really might share a common dietary cause, especially diets low in fiber. By 1970, he was connecting low fiber Western diets to slower bowel transit, smaller stools, and colon disease. And by the 1970s, fiber went from an old-fashioned, roughage to one of the most important ideas in modern nutrition and modern medicine. It is one of your best friends when it comes to fixing anything that you have wrong in your health, especially cholesterol and heart disease. And by the way, we're not done adding toppings to your oats and barley. If you want to get some high fiber, high protein foods, add some nuts. Now, some of you may say that nuts are fatty. Dr. Keyes, well, he said nuts, on the other hand, are very fatty. And so they add up to many calories if you eat them by the handful. And moderation is promoted to having to do your own shelling. And anyway, the flavor is better straight from the shell. Fortunately, the fat in most nuts is relatively unsaturated, will not tend to push up blood cholesterols. Almonds, Brazil nuts, fibrates, and walnuts are all in this class. Peanuts are less desirable. Coconuts, though, are highly filled with saturated fat, so you are not advised to start using coconut oil, but you have no restriction on ordinary amounts of coconut meat. And that's because, we don't eat like pounds and pounds of coconut meat, right? And it's full of fiber. But it's also because coconut meat is full of fiber, so that you're not directly eating the saturated fat. And to summarize what Dr. Keyes said, nuts have actually been shown in over 100 studies to help reduce cholesterol. But why would coconut increase cholesterol? And the answer is saturated fat. You're going to hear people telling you not to fear saturated fat. It's okay to eat coconut. It's healthy because it's plant-based. And then you're going to hear other people telling you to avoid saturated fat and to avoid coconut. Well, if you want to lower your cholesterol naturally and reduce heart disease and atherosclerosis and heart valve issues, you have to avoid saturated fat. There's no way around it. Nobody debates about that. Now, the other food category that I don't want you guys to forget is beans, lentil, chickpeas, split peas, legumes. Now, in the modern food culture, somehow we've managed to make beans look boring. But there is nothing boring about what they do in your body. Beans bring soluble fiber, and it's another powerhouse of resistant starch. So in a sense, there's like so many superhero category foods that can help you lower cholesterol that you can eat all in one bowl. Like literally, you can add beans to your oats and barley. But the reality is, you can't just survive on fiber and resistant starch alone. You need other important ingredients, such as a protein, and that's why beans shine. They not only bring fiber and plant protein, they bring minerals and polyphenols. They feed your microbiome. They slow glucose absorption, not just in that meal, but in the subsequent meal. They help you with fullness. They can replace foods that are much, much more cholesterol disruptive and insulin disruptive. And this replacement effect is huge because it'll help you eat less inflammatory foods. Swap your beans instead of processed meats. And you're not going to be just adding fiber and starch. You are removing saturated fat that's in the processed meat compounds, as well as some of the carcinogens, the excess sodium, all the inflammatory burdens that comes with highly processed foods, especially amino acids. And that's why I think beans are metabolic sponges. They change what happens after your meal. And if someone says that to me that, they can't eat beans because it doesn't agree with them, well, that makes sense to me because it feels really bad to be bloated. However, I would encourage them to start smaller. Literally start with 2 beans. Rinse a can of beans. Well, you can also try some lentils and you can pressure cook them if you want to make your own. But if you get those beans and you can make it into hummus, just try a tablespoon or just eat 1 or 2 beans a day. Slowly train your gut to eat beans. Now, tofu is another option. It has less fiber, so it actually may ease your system a little bit more. It helps your microbiome adapt. And the gas does not mean the bean is bad. The gas is that your gut bacteria, they've been underfed for years, and suddenly you're giving them a feast. You are training them. Just like going to the gym. You don't go to the gym and lift the heaviest weight the first day, right? You slowly work yourself up, you get sore, and then you know that exercise is good for you, even though maybe it's uncomfortable as you build up. And beans are one of those tools that you got to build up. So I mentioned tofu, which is basically a soybean, and it's one of the most understood foods in America. People hear soy and they think bad hormones. And they also think it's highly processed, like protein isolates, fake meat. But traditional Asian diets are filled with soybean-rich foods that are not ultra-processed. These are not junk food. It's tofu, tempeh, edamame beans, unsweetened soy milk, which is a bit more processed, but it's just soy milk. They don't add sugar in it, and they're not adding emulsifiers. Miso is made out of soy. Soybeans are a very powerful cholesterol-lowering food that also helps to lower blood pressure and reduce certain cancers. The soy plant provides protein that can directly replace animal protein. It also has some fiber. Depending on how you eat it, it may have more or less. And it has isoflavones, which are plant compounds that interact with the human biology in very complex, beneficial ways. So if you add tofu to a meal that already has lots of saturated fat with creams and butters and cheese and processed meat, you're probably not going to see the same benefit as a person who eats an Asian diet. But if tofu replaces the bacon, the cheese, your processed meat, then you will dramatically see how your metabolism shifts. And this shift, it actually shifting your taste palette as well as shifting your mitochondria. And of course, there's no perfect food, right? That's kind of impossible. When we talk about food, we're always comparing to what other food. So if you're comparing like a sausage pepperoni to a soy pepperoni, well, soy is going to be less inflammatory, but neither are ideal foods, right? We need to do whole soy foods instead of highly processed foods. These food choices, we have too many. They're too abstract. And when you eat soy, you'll be really surprised that can help you build a very satisfying meal with a better metabolic response. But if you don't like it, you don't have to eat it. There's plenty of other food to eat. But honestly, it's one of the most convenient, most affordable, cheapest proteins that I enjoy on a weekly basis. So really, the real question is, Dr. Keys, was his dietary advice outdated? And was this guy completely off his rockers? Or was he seeing something, foreshadowing something that, he's trying to convince the rest of us to embrace so that we can have his longevity. And I think what's happening now is too many people are playing mind games because we're so addicted with foods that we're designed to go for what's convenient and what's tasty that will spike our dopamine. And cholesterol is a molecule that really is so regulated by our hormones. And it's such a vital part of our health. But at the same time, when we have too much of it, it doesn't float around by itself. It travels with these delivery trucks, the lipoprotein packages. And these lipoproteins, they're necessary, but when they're in excess, they're inflammatory. And that's probably why two people can have the same cholesterol numbers on paper and have very different risks in real life. That's really what a lot of these influencers are trying to say. Because cholesterol is just one marker of a traffic jam. And keep in mind, cholesterol, again, it doesn't travel alone. It needs proteins to shuttle it. And there are various different kinds of cholesterol proteins that carry cholesterol. They're all kind of called lipoproteins as a group. And one specific protein is called apolipoprotein B. Now, if your apolipoprotein is elevated, that's actually very useful to tell us when your triglycerides are high, when you have insulin resistant, when you have diabetes or metabolic syndrome, and your cholesterol panel doesn't match the risks of your other markers, right? So that's why we now advocate that people check apolipoprotein B to validate more than what your standard lipid panel will tell you, especially when LDL cholesterol and apolipoprotein B are not agreeing with each other. Basically, LDL cholesterol tells us how much cargo is in the trucks, whereas apolipoprotein B tells us how many trucks are on the road. And when it comes to your heart and arterial disease, the number of trucks matter more than the cargo in any one truck. That's why a better laboratory number is to measure your apolipoprotein B number. And when you increase that number of cargo trucks in this highway, arterial highway, potentially you could actually cause a traffic jam to stop all flow. And your food, it will help you decide how many apolipoprotein trucks are damaging your highways, especially if it's interacting with high blood sugars. And really, it's important to keep all your markers low, especially blood sugars. And if you're interested in the best ways to lower your blood sugar, watch the next video.